Bueno, pues un gran vídeo. La verdad es que me viene fenomenal porque ENISA es una de las iniciativas fantásticas a las que puede acudir desde luego un emprendedor para crecer. Y no hace falta añadir nada más porque está fantásticamente bien explicado. Después de las primeras rondas, ¿qué? Esta es la gran pregunta que se hacen los buenos emprendedores. Los que han logrado pasar de tener una buena idea, de tener un buen producto, de conseguir validarlo en el mercado, a tener un negocio que de verdad puede crecer. Pero claro, después de que hemos conseguido nuestro producto, después de que hemos conseguido esos primeros apoyos de iniciativas de toda clase, de angel investors, después hay que ser mucho más grande. Después queremos financiar nuestra producción. Después queremos contratar equipos mucho más grandes de los que necesitábamos al principio. Después queremos vender en un montón de mercados. Y ahí es donde hace falta el dinero más grande. Y la gran pregunta que se hacen muchísimos emprendedores es, bueno, ¿y este dinero dónde está? ¿Quiénes lo ponen? ¿Por qué lo ponen? ¿Qué tengo que hacer para acercarme a ellos? El MIT Enterprise Forum es una organización que ayuda a los emprendedores de todo el mundo a relacionarse con las comunidades en las que residen. Y nosotros, una de las cosas que nos planteamos y que nos parece más importante es que la parte de la comunidad que más les suele interesar a los emprendedores, sobre todo al principio, pues es quien les financia, ¿no? Por lo tanto, tenemos siempre muchísimo interés en ayudaros a todos los emprendedores a acercaros a esa parte. Hoy traemos a EMTEC nuestro panel sobre capital de segunda ronda. Tenemos, como ha dicho Pedro, verdaderamente el privilegio de tener a algunos de los mejores de Europa. Y además traemos nuestro foro de inversión, que será esta tarde y en el que sé que muchos de vosotros vais a participar. Este diálogo lo vamos a tener en inglés. En MIT Enterprise Forum solemos hacer todas nuestras cosas en inglés. No solamente porque somos una comunidad internacional que se relaciona con personas que no son de habla española, sino que además porque creemos que todo emprendedor tiene que plantearse el mundo como arena y que, por lo tanto, tiene que ser capaz de relacionarse en inglés con el universo que le rodea. Así que estas son las últimas palabras que yo voy a decir en español antes de introducir a mi panel, pero después, en la ronda de preguntas que haremos al final, tomaremos preguntas en español y las iremos traduciendo al inglés oportunamente. Por supuesto, el que pueda comunicarse en inglés, que se sienta libre. Vamos a tener primero una presentación a cargo de Juan Carlos Ureta. Juan Carlos, lo primero que me gustaría decir de él es que él es un emprendedor. Es una de las cosas que él tiene más interesante. No solamente es el presidente del Instituto Español de Analistas Financieros, que agrupa a muchos de los que nos dedicamos a las finanzas en este país y que preocupa de la calidad de nuestro trabajo y del buen gobierno que afecta a todo lo que hacemos, sino que además él tiene una carrera extensísima tanto en el ámbito público como el privado y además muy relacionada con los mercados de capitales. Así que voy a pedirle a Juan Carlos que me acompañe en el estrado para ayudarnos a contestar la primera pregunta, y todo este debate lo vamos a hacer muy simple, que es ¿cómo funciona el dinero?
Muy bien, Paloma. Muchas gracias. Good morning. And my first word are to thank EMTEC for this invitation to share with you some views about the financing of innovation. I would like to begin with two ideas, two contradictions in some way. The first idea is that technology is without any doubt changing the world, but financial markets and policymakers do not really believe it. The second contradiction is that we live in a very powerful world, a world full of money, full of liquidity, but money is not being put to work because there is no confidence in the future. Why? Why these two contradictions? Well, I would like to say that the policies to confront the economic crisis have been very pragmatic, but in some way have been disoriented. They have not attacked the core of the crisis, they have only attacked the liquidity issue. The $10 trillion that the big central banks have been given to the markets, to the economy in the last 5 years, have been useful to maintain the old work, but not to finance innovation. So the consequence of all this is that the process of creative destruction has been delayed or even forgotten. In the 30s, one big economist, Joseph Schumpeter, concluded that innovation was the single most important driver of economic change through the process of creative destruction. A complete different view from the idea of Adam Smith the notion of Adam Smith of an invisible hand that leads to stability in the market price. So this idea of the this process of creative destruction has been delayed by the policies that have been put in place for the policymakers to confront the crisis. And the consequence is that markets, financial markets, are not properly allocating the financial resources. Markets in some way are distorted by the policymakers. This is a big problem because, as the Bank of International Settlements of Basilea said 2 years ago, in 2010, the monetary medicine has become a big problem for the growth of the economy. Well, this is very surprising because financial markets really have as the main purpose to allocate financial resources to useful and profitable destinations. And really, as Michael Mandel points out in his book, Rational Exuberance, technology and innovation is the true source of value and the true source of growth. But financial markets, as I told before, are not designed to finance innovation, and mainly in Europe, less in Europe than in the United States. And the financial crisis has accentuated this because we have the crowding out, so we are seeing that a lot of money goes to the public spending and not really to innovation. Well, but there is a more structural problem, a more structural concern. We can say that promoting the idea of financing, of giving money to innovators, is really a tough sell. It's really very hard, very difficult, because innovation and technological change have a good number of enemies, have a lot, legions of enemies. And this is a problem that really is connected with one simple idea. When you are an innovator and you want to really finance, you are going to demand money to the status quo, to the people that really is benefiting from the markets that you want to attack, that you want to eat. So it is difficult that these people gives you money really to eat their markets. So that is a structural problem and really a big problem. But the history, fortunately, tells us that against all these obstacles, finally innovation finds its way, and finally innovation happens. Why? It happens because it creates value, it works, it solves people's necessities, and really it works because it makes money. That is the real thing. Innovation, technology change really makes money. I like a lot an article of one of the big of the technology, one of the big investors and one of the big innovators, that is Marc Andreessen. And Marc Andreessen, that founded the Netscape and many other things, wrote an article in Wall Street Journal in the summer in August of 2011, in the middle of all the turmoil of the markets in August of 2011, and he spoke about Silicon Valley, about the controversy of the software companies, about the occasional IPOs of Facebook and Twitter. Then Facebook was not still listed in the stock exchange. And he said, Andreessen said, "My own theory is that we are in the middle of a dramatic and broad technological and economic shift in which software companies are poised to take over large swaths of the economy." The article was named "Why Software is Eating the World." He said, "More and more major business and industry are being run on software and delivered as online services." And he spoke about in the world's largest bookseller, Amazon, the world's largest video service, Netflix, the dominant music companies, Apple, iTunes, Spotify, Pandora, the fastest growing entertainment companies, for example, Zynga or Rovio, the today's fastest growing recruiting company, LinkedIn, the more innovative movie producer, Pixar, and many other companies that really are leaders in their sector, and they are based on software innovation. All those companies and other companies are eating much of the value chain of industry that are widely viewed as primarily existing in the physical world. So the reality is that the technology is so strong that really it happens against all these obstacles that we have seen before. And what Mark Anderson said in this article, he said, over the next 10 years, the battles between incumbents and software-powered insurgents will be epic. Joseph Schumpeter, said Anderson, the economist who coined the term creative distraction, would be proud. And he finally told at the end of his article, I know where I put my money. And really he has been a very successful investor investing in innovation. But let us come again to our crisis, to our today economic crisis situation, and let us come again to the need of creative distraction. Really, the core of the problems that we are seeing now in the economy and in the way we have confronted the crisis is that some of the policies, many of the policies are dedicated to maintain the old world, to maintain the zombie economy, the zombie companies, and not really to foster innovation. That is a very big problem because it will, without any doubt, reduce the potential of growth of the economy in the next years. It is not a question of months, it is a question of years to come. So the history of human progress is the history of initiatives, errors, learning, and new initiatives. So this is the natural way the things happen, and really to distort the natural things is always very bad. Well, let us speak a little bit about the financial model of innovation. I think it is very important to speak about this. And as I said before, against the backdrop of inertia, against all the obstacles, innovation finds its way. And the curious thing is that it finds its way in a very also innovative way of financing, and in a way of financing that is really the way that is adapted to the situation post-crisis, to the new normality. Why? First of all, innovation and technology base its financing in equity, not in debt. We are in a world that was completely overburdened by debt, completely over-leveraged, and innovation has always financed with equity. It was also in the dot-com bubble. We saw in the dot-com bubble that we had all the financing of the new dot-com companies in equity, and that was key because when the bubble of the technology of the dot-com break up, the reality is that it didn't extend to the rest of the economy. It was very different to the real estate bubble that we have today. No? Why? Because it was financed by equity, not by debt. The second thing is that the financing of the technology companies is based on usefulness, and that is completely key. When we dedicate, as analysts, as Paloma said before, to make a research, we always have to connect the return with the usefulness. That is key. Nothing can be profitable if it doesn't give usefulness to people. That is key. And the technology, the good technology companies, they are useful to people. That is the key. The third thing is that technology companies and innovators get their money on the markets, on the financial markets, not on the banks. Nobody goes to a bank to finance a technological company. And that is the new way to finance companies. The market, financial markets, not so much the banking credit. The innovation the innovation financial model must be innovative itself, must be groundbreaking in some way, must be really based on new techniques. And I will speak very, very briefly about some of these new techniques to get new financing. No? Very, very, very briefly, as I told. No? First of all, we see some big companies that are dedicating some of their muscle to finance startups. One of the examples in Spain is Telefónica, that has promoted Guaira. Guaira is a company that is dedicated, is financed by Telefónica, and is dedicated to finance startups. They have, they are just only 1 year old. They have studied, they have received 14,000 projects. They have invested in 180 projects. And the good thing is that after their financing, Guaira, what does is a so-called demo day 1 year later, and they propose to invest to other investors in those companies. So the good things and the powerful thing of Guaira is that they are really creating a global network of innovation. They are going to do in December or January, I don't remember very well, I think it's in December, in Miami, a global meeting just to promote and to help these companies to go on, no? to this second and third rounds. No? So this is a good model. No? Big companies that understand that they can, they must finance these startups just to help them also to go to new business areas. No? The second interesting model is what we could call the philanthropic model. No? Sorry, because the philanthropic model. No? And one example is the Khan Academy. No? The Khan Academy that is really very interesting because you can go there to khanacademy.com and you can find thousands of videos and of explanations about very different matters, no? subjects. And Khan Academy financed through philanthropy, because you can give a donation to this academy, and he gets this guy gets their money from philanthropy. And it was very well known because Bill Gates, in one of their speeches, he told, "Well, I have given to Khan Academy a lot of money because I like a lot personally." No? So this is another way. Another way is the so-called crowdfinancing. Crowdfunding refers to the funding of a company by selling small amounts of equity to many investors. Crowdfinancing has been launched through many platforms. In Spain, we have had this platform, Lanzanos, that has been sold recently. And the idea is to share an investment through many small amounts. No? Well, today the regulators are looking at this because it's maybe that it is an activity that could be regulated. But I would like more to let it without regulation, because really it is very, let us say, internet way to finance, not to say, well, I have this idea, if you want to put your money here, put it. Of course, I am not going to guarantee you anything, and of course you are making a risk investment, but I do it, and you do it in a very free, completely freely base and a voluntary base. No? So crowdfinancing has been successful, but again, we see now that they want to regulate it. We will see what happens. No? So crowdfinancing is another innovative way to finance. No? And of course, we have all this financing of business angels, friends and family, and whatever. And that is very important, in my opinion, because sometimes when we ask ourselves, or you, innovators, say, well, how can I get money? And my answer is, by whatever means you can have it. I mean, no matter, I mean, that is the real answer, because you have to explore all the possibilities. We know, I have been also, as Paloma said, entrepreneur, and it's difficult to get money. It's difficult, but you have also to demonstrate that you can get money, you can get resources to work, no? And that is the key, no? I remember an anecdote of Truman Capote. Truman Capote was a very well-known writer, and at the end of his career, one journalist asked him, well, Mr. Capote, what really would you recommend to a young and talented writer that is beginning? And he said, well, I would recommend him to marry a millionaire. Well, a part of the joke. The reality is, he thought, well, you have to finance. You have, even if you are very talented, the beginning is very difficult. So I would give some practical advices to innovators and in search of funding, no? That are not probably advices that you will find extraordinary, but is my true opinion. And the first thing is to answer yourself in a very sincere way, a simple question is, do I have a useful proposition? Do I have really something that is going to be useful for the people, that is going to really to solve people's problems? And if the answer is yes, you have to attack the financial problem with all the weapons. You have to use every possible means to get your money. And you have to be as innovative in your financing as you have been in your technology innovation. So, because financing plus technology are stronger than either one alone. No? And remember, and I finish with this, remember, technology innovation makes money. You have there the NASDAQ 100 index in the last years. You can see that has been the index that has been better in terms of return since Lehman failure, bankruptcy. And you can see here the difference between the NASDAQ 100 and the Euro Stocks. And you can see there how really having smaller and not so prepared financial markets is a problem in Europe. It's really a problem in Europe. It's one of our big problems for growth. And with this, I finish my presentation, Paloma. And of course, later we can have the...
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that it's probably surprising to some people here how the money actually cares about technology. Juan Carlos is the president of a bank, by the way, his own bank, that he started from zero. He was pioneering in using technology to address to the people. He created a model that works, and now he is the president of a bank. So I think he's a good example. I'm picking two sentences that I've heard from him. One is, innovation finds its way because it creates value and it makes money. That's something that one should bear in mind when addressing to the guys that need to make money as a business. And the other is, use every possible means to fund your idea. So I like that this sentence, I like very much that you said this, because this is exactly what we are trying to help you guys understand. Which are the possible means to fund your idea? So I'm calling my colleagues to this panel, Girish, Axel, and Vittorio, and they represent, I'm very proud of having them here, and I will very much like you to welcome them with a very warm welcome, because they come from far. People like them don't come to Spain too often. So I'm very proud of having them here, and I would like to welcome them very much. We are going to have a very straightforward dialogue. This is not going to be in a language that people won't understand. We want this to be very natural, and I will be very happy if after this panel, everybody here in this room feels closer to the capital. We are not wolves. We are not the bad guy of the film. This is a very interesting industry, and we are very much interested in you guys. We want to partner with you, so we want you to know how our business works for once. Because you always tell us what you do, and this is very important for us, but we think it's very important for us that you know how we work. So today we are going to see three different manners of getting funded in second round, in getting growth dollars, growth money, and we're going to have a corporate venture investor, Girish Nadkarni. He will explain about himself later, but he will represent here the corporate venture possibility. Then we have Axel Kalinowski. Axel will also speak about himself, but he represents the public floating alternative for high-growth companies, for startups. You don't need to be enormous to float, and he will be explaining why and how to get in there. And finally, Vittorio. Vittorio is one of the most interesting investors in private equity, and is also representing the family office option here. People that will be interested in putting their own money, their personal money, or the money of people they trust, have entrusted money to them in high-growth companies. And they have very interesting investing models that you may not be aware, and I would like them to show you. So I would ask first, Girish, if you may like to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Paloma. Before I start, let me just make two quick observations. One is, I am very, very impressed with how well this whole program has been organized and how smoothly it has gone. So my congratulations to all the people involved in the organization. The other observation, if I make, is, I travel around the world looking for new ideas and new investments, and I've been to Estonia, China, India, all over the place. When I came here yesterday afternoon, I was a little concerned because I saw a lot of suits and ties. And whenever I see lots of suits and ties, I'm a little concerned whether there is enough innovation there. I mean, joking aside, no offense, Juan Carlos, but just talking to the people in the audience and also seeing all the presentations, I was very, very impressed with the passion, the technology, the ideas, etc. So my early fears were put to bed. But coming back to your primary question, my name is Girish Nadkarni. I am the head of ABB Technology Ventures, which is the corporate venture arm of ABB. As some of you may know, ABB is a 40 billion plus conglomerate based out of Zurich, though we are in over 120 countries. We are large on the automation side as well as the entire power value chain from generation, distribution, transmission, etc. And as some of you may know, the concept of corporate venturing is not new, but more and more companies are getting involved in venture investing because they're realizing that innovation comes not just from their own R&D labs, but is all over the place. So you have Microsoft, Google, Cisco, IBM, Schneider, Siemens, all of us engaged very actively in corporate venture activities. So at a very basic level, what we do is we look to invest in early stage companies which have technologies or business models of strategic interest to us. So again, important to emphasize, it's not just always technologies, but sometimes business models can also be very innovative, and we look for those as well. So the question is, we invest if we meet two criteria. One is there is a return which is adequate to the kind of risk we take, which is what every venture capitalist does, but it also has to have strategic interest to us. And by strategic interest, we mean either it's a technology which is emerging and we want to learn more about it, we want to keep an eye on it, or it's in an adjacent space and it's an area we want to potentially get into. So rather than jumping into it with both feet, we want to dip our toe into it, learn a little bit more. It could be a company we want to acquire. Again, it's a new technology, it's a new industry. We want to see how the technology risk works out. We want to see how the market risk works out. And if possible, we could be a potential buyer of the company. And finally, we occasionally take a page from Intel Capital where we invest because we want to support or encourage the growth of the industry. Because if the industry grows, they could then become buyers of our products and services. So we invest in all stages of the company. We are not bound by any particular definition of early stage or late stage, and we invest globally. So we have investments in China, Israel, US, UK, all over the place.
Right. Thank you very much, Chris. It's a great description of what a corporate venture would look like. I would like to ask Vittorio to tell us a little bit about himself and his interests.
Thank you, Paloma. Before moving into the family office space, I spent 12 years in the banking side, working for family offices. And then I realized that this world was changing. The family offices were becoming more and more sophisticated, more and more talented, with people exiting the banks and starting their own venture sponsored by families. And I got tempted, and I did the same jump. And I jumped a family office that is based between Portugal and Brazil, that had great ambitions, not as many means as the ambitions. And therefore, partnership and partnering with other families was the DNA and is the DNA of our business. Currently, I'm the CEO of a small office in London that the only purpose of this office is to network with family offices. And it is incredible. There are hundreds of billions of euro, dollar, whatever, that are connected. They talk to each other. They meet in countries. No one really knows about them. They trust each other. If they have to make an investment in Argentina, guess what? There's the CEO of the company. He's the owner of the company, which is why it's very interesting, because the corporate venture is very similar to what we say, what we think. So I'm not going to repeat it, but basically we are sometimes the shareholders, or we represent some of the shareholders of those companies. So the philosophy is very similar. We like talking. We only invest if we trust the other side. We are entering at any stage. Actually, we like entering maybe a bit later and maybe exiting a little bit earlier, as long as we see a value chain, as long as we see a theme that we like. We are not bounded by the corporate objective. Therefore, it can be anything, particularly if a trusted family office in Brazil, in our case, or wherever, induce us and explain that it makes sense. It can be healthcare, it can be education, it can also be indirect exposure to technology. We like the concept of investing in platforms that enable value creation, investing in incubators. It's the best way to be indirectly exposed to a lot of startups, and then cherry picks between those startups. One of the drive, which I think is important, I wanted to summarize, is, for example, we are in Spain. I'm Italian, we're in Spain, and I work for a Portuguese family office. So the only aspect that is missing is the Greek factor. Otherwise, this is a complete pig problem. And we have a great, in Spain and in Portugal, we have fantastic opportunities. 10 million people in Portugal have a market of 200 million in Brazil and in Africa. They don't have technology, they don't have innovation, but they have capacity to export that. Spain, the same. 300 million people speak Spanish outside of Spain. And this is incredible for content, for everything. So there are enormous opportunities. And on the other side of the oceans, there are family offices that are receptive to technologies that have been proven elsewhere. So this is a little bit what we do. We are not specialists. I'm not a technical guy. I'm a lawyer as a background. I spent 15 years in banking, so 12, and now 5 in this group of family offices. But we have nose, or we have friends with nose, and we try to see the opportunities. So I think that this is a little bit the spirit of the way to do.
Great. Well, I think that maybe some people here has been also surprised by this. The money also networks, same as technology. And the money is also creative, and is also keen on learning on new worlds and new businesses. And now I would like to introduce my friend Axel Kalinowski. He will introduce himself, and he represents the option of getting money from many people in an ordered way, which is what the capital markets do. And he's also in charge of a very interesting vehicle, the AAM, the Alternative Market in London, which is a great hub, and I'm very keen on having him explaining to you how this works.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Paloma. First of all, I would like to fully subscribe to the comments Girish made regarding this conference. It's an honor to be here. And it's good to see that Spain is at the forefront of sort of facilitating entrepreneurship across Europe. I wish there were more events like this. I think Europe needs events like this where people come together and discuss what can be done to make things happen for entrepreneurial, innovative ideas. I represent the sort of public equity markets, specifically from London. In Europe, we are lucky that we have actually the biggest global financial market in the world, which is London. So you can imagine we have investment funds from all over the world, including Vittorio, who sit in London and manage funds, whether it's a geographic sort of diversity or whether it's diversity in terms of sector expertise. They're all sitting in London, and sort of that's the angle I represent. We have at the London Stock Exchange a market which is specifically targets sort of growth capital and growth companies, innovative companies from the tech, life sciences sector, etc. It's called AIM. It's been around for a very, very long time, since 1995, so it survived the crisis that we all know about, the dot-com bubble, now the most recent crisis, etc. There are over 1,000 companies on this market, and many of them, hundreds of them, are actually from the tech space, the life science space, etc. And as Paloma touched on at the very beginning, you don't have to be a 100, 200, 500 million dollar company in order to think about public markets. So just to give you an idea, the median market capitalization of a company on AIM is around 20-21 million euro. And 80% sort of fall between the market cap of £5 million to £50 million. So 80% of those 1,100 companies are in this range. There are some which are bigger, there are some which are smaller. So there are genuine opportunities for companies and genuine advantages as well, which maybe we'll be talking about a bit later, for companies to actually think about sort of all the options, including the public equity option.
Thank you very much, Axel. Well, again, You don't need to be a giant to float in a market. There's 20 million euro in a global economy. It's not that big, is it? I'm sure that the dreams of all people here are way bigger, aren't they? So, and, this option is right there. So, money is not that inaccessible, big money. Now, I think we've learned a bit of how money works. Now, I would like to focus a little bit in how the companies should look like in order to be eligible for these guys together with me here having an interested look at those. Which the DNA of a company that is eligible for growth should be. Vittorio, you were talking about new markets and the possibilities, but in order to be able to address to a different continent than the one you have been born with, you need to have what is it about teams? Is it about size? Is it about products or markets or a combination of everything? What would you look first? Which is the very natural DNA first thing that you would look like?
I think if we are lucky, we meet in a forum like this one or in an informal situation an entrepreneur that has discovered a cutting-edge technology. But this, for us, is luck. We are not based in Silicon Valley, and so I think this is luck. If we can invest in a company that we think is unique, we have to be very careful and very quick in finding a partner that is in Silicon Valley or maybe in ABB, etc., to help us, because we're going to have very little time available not to be surpassed by someone else similarly clever. So I think that those cutting-edge technologies maybe can be for us. We have one in our portfolio, but I don't think it's the base of the investment. What we need is an entrepreneur that has a good product, doesn't need to be the best one, because it fits in a value chain that the sponsor, us, the strategic, we are not financial, we consider ourselves strategic, needs. If we need to go to Brazil and we have a portfolio of newspaper in Brazil or in Portugal, and we are investor of a telecom company, etc., well, yes, we will need a technology that enable us to distribute through the pipes of a telecom the content that are in paper. So it doesn't need to be the best one. It needs to be the one that fits better to my bigger opportunity. So I think we are more entrepreneur with younger entrepreneur, and we try to onboard them. Then the governance needs to be discussed, but the good news is that family offices are not sort of shark. They don't need to maximize too soon. They have a bigger project. So I think for us is the value chain, the person on the other side, and what can I do as a big picture rather than the specific technology that I'm seeing.
Good, thank you. But a corporate venture is probably having a different approach to things, because maybe in terms of synergies or in terms of investment scope, I don't know. But from the startup side, I think working together with a corporate venture, it might sometimes be seen as a conflict of interest. So how would you think of companies being eligible for you, and how would you deal with that, in some ways, natural conflict of interest, if any?
There is occasionally a conflict of interest, but 9 times out of 10 we find ways to address that. The first thing an entrepreneur has to do is to really understand what is the mandate of the corporate venture firm. Are they there to make money? Are they there for making potential acquisitions, like, say, a Cisco or a Google does? Or are they there to learn more about new technologies? So they really have to do their homework and understand what the mandate of the corporate venture group is, so you can avoid sort of surprises. The second aspect of that is to see how active will the corporate venture group help them with. Because most of our companies, we don't just put money, we also help them on the R&D side, but more importantly, we help them from a market access perspective. So we invest in a company in Israel and we take them to Europe, we take them to China, we take them to the US. We invest in a company in the US, we take them to Europe, we take them to China, etc. So, a small company may have a great product, but if the world doesn't know about it, there is no point in having a great product. So we help them market this. And so what we do is, there's a separate venture agreement as an investor, so we act as a pure investor, just like any other VC, but then the business side enters into our arm's length sort of commercial agreement with them. So these are important ways to address this. We are sensitive to the fact that there is a perceived conflict of interest, and it's an important question to address. But we never asked for specific terms. We never asked for rights of first refusal. We never asked for any special rights, because we are aware that there are other investors in the syndicate as well. And so we don't want to create a situation where others feel that there is some level of the playing field is not level. And to be fair, 3 years, 4 years from now, we're not sure whether we would still be interested in this space or not. So we don't want to tie the company up in any way.
Good. Great. It's very interesting to understand that also the corporate venture money will partner with the private equity or family office money. So you need to put a lot of pieces in the same place. And you said before that you don't need to be big to float in a market, especially in an alternative market. But not every company that is floating would actually be successful. So I know that many you were these days we were informally talking about this, and actually is very proud of how the companies are actually doing and the growth that they are experimenting in the AIM. But in your opinion, what would make out within the context of a floating environment, what will be the successful DNA of a company within that environment? How will you need to be in order to raise money from that kind of source and to remain successful over time?
Well, the factors which sort of public equity looks at are not necessarily dissimilar to the sort of the success factors which sort of private equity look at. Speaking in London, we have quite a diverse set of investors. So there are the big institutional funds, which many of you will know, BlackRock, Fidelity, etc. There are global funds which have funds dedicated to the SME sort of growth sector. And then there are funds which are sort of more venture capital in nature. They're called venture capital trusts. So they're basically listed venture capital firms, and they invest in sort of businesses they like as well, which are quite small in nature and sort of more risky in nature. But essentially the universe of investors is very wide. So these venture capital trusts, for instance, which is in London, they represent roughly 1/3 of the investor universe. Then you have sort of high net worth individuals which invest, etc. So there's a great diversity, and you can imagine everyone has sort of slightly different criteria in terms of what they invest in. From what we've seen in terms of activity, of sector activity and the type of companies coming through, I think what is true for all of them is that they have management which is very, very credible, which has experience in the space, management which doesn't just project blue sky sort of projections, but actually they're realistic projections. There might be already financial track records back there. They're operating in a sort of market and segment which is very current, very upcoming, and those are the sort of companies which have done very well this year. So we had quite a resurgence of companies from the tech sector as well as from the life science sector. So in June this year, just before the summer and sort of Olympic Games, where everything was then quiet because everyone was watching the Olympics, we had a number of software and tech companies come through. An Austrian global automotive sort of enterprise solution company, another company called Wendisco was sort of operating, producing software for collaboration of software developers. We had biotech companies coming through, etc. And they were all a bit different in terms of size and their stage of development. But they managed to raise funds, and they're actually sort of the way to the market has been very successful to this point. So all of them are actually up around 25%. The most successful, Vendisco, is up 140% in 5 months. Wow. So that has allowed the company to now look beyond in terms of adding additional capabilities, like acquiring, using those shares to acquire other companies and continue to grow. So, but essentially it's very diverse.
So it's teams, markets, and growth. You know, it sounds simple, isn't it? It's not that complicated. I'm sure there's a lot of people here who is totally convinced that they have a team, they have a market, and they can grow. So you need to make it happen. But that's exactly what the money in this case is going to ask you for. Well, we've talked about DNA and motivation, so because I want to allow more time for questions that I'm sure there will be, I'm jumping into something that is very straightforward. Let me be very practical right now, because I'm sure that all of you want to know how to find these people. Where are they? How could I present myself to this kind of investor? I have something for them. I'm totally clear that I have what it takes. But where are they? So I will ask each of you, how can you guys be found?
I think what is important, after I give you my email address, but what is important is once you have done your business plan and you have really positioned yourself and you put your own money, your own time, etc., you actually know who are your competitors and who are your partners or potential partners, and you actually also think who I know that can help me. So I think for me this is the first round of the first circle of relationship that someone that is at the very beginning of the journey needs to think, because now the market has changed a lot. I think that the venture capital environment is obsolete, and the family offices have come into the platform with a lot of money. So who can be the family office that is interested in what you're doing as an entrepreneur? Who can be the rich guy in my town that understands, or the business, or the sort of in smaller scale, the corporate venture? I think this is the first step, because if you are at your first round, because otherwise it's very difficult. I think that the traditional venture capitalists are now having difficulties in raising their own funds, because the banks have lost their own credibility, and before investors were going through the banks, and now they don't want to go through the banks. So I think that people are doing on their own. We speak directly among investors. So is who needs me, and let's go and see if I can partner with him. This is my first question, really understanding who can be my angel from a strategic and not only financial.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Which are the steps, very briefly, because I would very much like to provide with room for questions, but first steps, can you describe the process to address to a market such as yours?
Very easy to find. Just go on Google and type in Axel London or London Stock Exchange, and my details will come up. So that's very easy. My role is to meet companies and discuss what the opportunities are for them. And I do it across Europe. So I do it for the south of Europe. I'm often also in the Nordic region, in Eastern Europe, etc. Just yesterday during the conference, I was in touch with a Spanish company looking at their business plan, whether there are opportunities. 2 weeks ago, I was in Barcelona meeting with the venture capital firms as well as with a biotech company to discuss opportunities. So I'm very happy to sort of, whenever you see an opportunity, to sort of sit down and see whether it makes sense for a company-specific case to help the company go forward and execute sort of its growth plans. So it's very, very, very easy, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. That sounds easy, isn't it? But before asking a final question to Juan Carlos, I would like to ask Girish, how can everybody here addressing you on other people like you from the corporate venture world?
We encourage people to contact us, send us a teaser. We respond to every single person who contacts us. We look at over 1,000 business plans or ideas a year. We look at it from all over the world. The one thing I would recommend you do is, a lot of people assume that just explaining what your product does is enough, but sometimes it's helpful if you write to different corporate venture firms, whether it's ABB or anybody else, to say how this would help the company. So when you write to us, tell us, look, don't just assume that just because you describe the product that we will get it. Because very often what you're creating is something new. It's a new product, it's a new market, it's a new concept. So help us think about, okay, if this is ABB's business, how would this fit in and where would that take us? What is, why we should invest in there? That's also a very powerful way. And we can look at it and say, aha, now we get it. So this is something, whether you write to us or any other corporate venture firm, I would recommend you do that.
Thank you. Well, and finally, let me be extremely straightforward again as my last question, again, really very briefly. But you said before, investing is now about equity, not debt. So you need, so the money is not floating around and it's not coming as it used to. So how the P&L of a company should look like in order to get money today? Because when the times of debt were happy, you didn't need that factors that much. But now, how the P&L account should look like? Is cash flow that important? Cash flow positive being that important or not? What would you recommend for companies to try to look like prior to addressing to investors? In terms of P&L, in terms of balance sheet?
Well, first of all, when I look at all these projections, many people that comes to us with several projects for an IPO, for the alternative market, and when you look, when you see a P&L projection that really is like, first year losses, second year equilibrium, third year big growth, fourth year really extraordinary growth, you don't rest on it. I mean, in my opinion, it's very important the entrepreneur, the quality of the people you see there. Numbers are not so important. I can tell you, I remember one anecdote. When in the year 2002, I was watching the TV, and I saw an interview with Jeff Bezos, the chairman of Amazon, no? And the interviewer told him, well, how can you convince an investor to invest in Amazon? And he told, well, really, I cannot convince, I don't want to convince anybody to invest in Amazon. I have this business, I can explain the dynamic of the business, how it works. We are doing operating profit, even if we lose money, but we lose money because of the platform. But I don't want to convince anybody. I want people to, what I mean is, sometimes this overselling is very negative, to sell, to close a deal. And it's very negative. You don't rest on numbers that are really so impressive, but at the end you don't really look at it as something credible, no? And it is very important the entrepreneur and the trust that he can give you. And I would like to say another thing about how to connect with people, with big people, with people that really can help you. It's easier than it seems. In my life, my experience is that as more important is a person, it's easier to connect with him. But when you connect with him, you have to previously, and you have told it, to make your homework very well, because these important people is people with a lot of things, with not so much time. And if you phone to any of the big people in the world, probably, without knowing you, they are going to tell you, okay, I will see you. My secretary will give you a meeting, an appointment. But you have to do your homework very well. You have to make your research before. You have to study very well. If you are going to speak with somebody that really your product is going to help him in any way, you have to study very well, and that is very important. And you have to study very well your numbers, and you cannot put there any number. I have seen a lot of projections that are really wishful thinking, and that is really so frustrating that it's better to avoid it.
Well, thank you very much. So, well, to me, this session today, I will call it Money Made Easy. I'm that optimistic. I'm bearing the hope that some barriers maybe are starting to go down between you guys and these growth dollars. I would like to open a small time now for questions. I remind you that we will be taking questions in Spanish. Así que ahora hablaré por unos momentos en español porque me gustaría ahora, yo traduciré cualquier cosa, pero estoy segura que por las caras que he estado viendo durante todo el tiempo de esta sesión, he visto muchísimo interés y seguro que más de uno o más de dos, pues aparte de pedirles el teléfono directamente, que ya se han puesto a tiro bastantes de ellos, pues seguramente quiere preguntar algo. ¿Ahí?
Hola, buenos días. Mi pregunta viene que un temor que tienen todos los emprendedores cuando consiguen por primera vez, en primera ronda, consiguen que un inversor se interese por su proyecto. Tienen el temor de que esa inversión de dinero vaya a quitarles control de la gestión de su empresa, ¿no? ¿Cómo colaboran ellos? ¿Cómo funciona esa colaboración respetando, digamos, el modelo de negocio o la idea original que pueda haber tenido el emprendedor?
Gracias. I think maybe you got it. She's worried about control when she's asking about how can you manage to respect the idea and respect the entrepreneurs, understanding of how the business should go and how the ideas should develop when you are so big and you're taking, maybe more equity than others. So who wants to answer to this? Maybe you, Vittorio.
I think it's difficult because if you have a business that you believe that it can grow on its own and it's going to be the business for your life and you have discovered the perfect niche, etc., well, then, you have to try to actually control as much as possible the control of your company. But this is, you are starting a journey to be an entrepreneur and you want the company to be yours, etc. So, the public market gives you certain certainties, etc. It depends from the business you are in, because certain businesses are not meant to be kept in control. You are an entrepreneur. It's better to have 3 success stories where you have been in and out within 3-4 years, because you chose the right guy and you actually agreed with him to exit soon. So it's difficult. Sometimes if you want to control too much, you're going to lose either the opportunity or the investor. So I don't think you need to worry that much. I think you have to worry that for the period that you are invested, you are extracting as much as possible. Then according to the business, you should hopefully have people that knows enough to let you understand when it's time to give it up, because not everything should be kept for long.
We have time. I don't want because we have the Investors Forum, and this organization is not only wonderful because they do wonderful things, but they also are very good at managing time. So we have time for one more question only. Who would like to make that question? That person.
Juan Carlos, te lo voy a hacer en español, ¿de acuerdo? A ver, mi pregunta es que estás hablando de que las empresas necesitan capital y no deuda. Pero lo que estamos viendo, por ejemplo, desde hace 2 o 3 años tenemos un mercado, que es el MAB, que creo que está un poquito destinado a este tipo de empresas, small caps, medium caps, pero que creo que son 20 o 21 compañías, 20 o 21 compañías las que ahora mismo están en lista, cotizando, pero que durante el año 2012 ninguna ha entrado. Entonces, no sé cuál es el problema de este mercado para que empresas que el perfil que estamos viendo aquí en estos días podría ser factible, no está funcionando. ¿Cuál crees que es el problema de este mercado? Gracias.
That's a tough one.
Sí, voy a responderla en español.
Sí.
Bueno, vamos a ver. El problema del MAB se sitúa en el mismo problema que tienen hoy en día los mercados de capitales en general. Yo he tratado de exponerlo. Son mercados de capitales que no están diseñados para financiar a las pequeñas compañías en general, menos aún a las startups. Y también está dentro del problema que hoy en día tienen los mercados de capitales en España y en Europa, como he dicho antes, y es que son mercados de capitales que han ido a menos en la liquidez y en la provisión de liquidez. Entonces, el MAB, de todas formas, el MAB podríamos considerarlo como un cierto éxito, porque es verdad que en los últimos meses no ha habido ninguna, pero el MAB ha servido para financiar a unas 20, 25 compañías. Yo, como responsable de una entidad financiera, de Renta 4 Banco, hemos sido directamente introductores en el MAB de dos compañías, además muy tecnológicas las dos, una Ibercom y otra Neuron Biofarma. Las dos, sin el MAB, no habrían podido seguir sus planes de negocio, así de crudo, es decir, no habrían podido sobrevivir, y gracias al MAB las dos lo están haciendo muy bien. Es decir, es verdad que no funciona como debería funcionar. Yo eso lo situaría en lo que es el contexto general de que los mercados financieros, lamentablemente, no están funcionando bien para financiar ni a la pequeña y mediana empresa, ni a la innovación, ni a la innovación tecnológica. Y, sin embargo, lo que debo afirmar es que el MAB, con todos sus problemas, pues ahí tenemos 20 y tantas compañías que se han logrado financiar en el MAB vía capital y que, además, pues gracias a eso siguen ahí, porque si no, algunas de ellas ya ni existirían, es decir, que no estarían ahí, habrían sido compañías simplemente que habrían desaparecido, ¿no? Eso es lo que puedo decir. Y es verdad, yo comparto la crítica, el MAB tiene que mejorar muchísimo, pero mejor que haya MAB a que no lo haya, porque la verdad... Ahora, también quiero decir, el MAB no está pensado para startups. Es decir, específicamente las normas del MAB exigen unos años, no recordar si son 3 años, de track record de la compañía. Es decir, por tanto, no están pensados para startup. Para startup hay que ir a otros ámbitos, no al MAB. Y en el MAB, la verdad que en la bolsa, yo pertenezco al consejo también de la bolsa, y la verdad que estamos preocupados por fomentarlo y por de alguna manera, tratar de que se utilice más. Porque las que han salido al MAB ha sido una buena experiencia. Han captado al final capital, y eso casi es la única forma de captar capital que han tenido algunas compañías, ¿no? Pero sí, es verdad que hay que mejorar.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Well, on behalf of the MIT Enterprise Forum of Spain, we really hope that today we have taken a step together with you. I do hope that you find yourselves closer to the capital, that you are keen on growing, that you can keen on performing, that this is not looking that tough now. You can see that nobody here has spoken about crisis. Everybody here has spoken about creating value and having good business models, good management teams, and good ambitions. I believe that here there is a lot of that. So who cares about crisis? There is a lot of money out there. So thank you, everybody. Thank you to each and every one of you. Thank you for coming from far, devoting to us time. We are worth the effort, and I would like to say thank you very much to you all.